Hi, I'm Karen Krolak. I'm one of the co-artistic directors of Monkey House. I am a white, middle-aged woman with what can only be described as feral white hair that goes in all directions around my head. I'm wearing a pink hand-knit sweater, and I am sitting in the new pop-up space, the Dance Complex at Canal in Kendall Square, with Jess Roseman, who is going to be sharing her amazing Nourish project that she's been working on for the last year. Jess, would you like to take a second and introduce yourself? Thanks.
I'm Jessica Roseman. I'm a black biracial woman. I have short curly hair. I'm wearing a kikoi from Kenya. It's fuchsia with stripes. And I'm wearing a dress with a geometric pattern on it, navy blue and triangles. And I'm sitting in front of a white wall and this beautiful silky backdrop by Clementine Kummer. And we are in Kendall Square on landfill, what used to be the Charles River, or the marshland along the Charles River, land where the Massachusetts and Pawtucket people inhabited. I think of myself as a solo performer, solo dance artist, and I'm a mom, and I'm a massage therapist, and I'm also a Feldenkrais practitioner. So I'm really interested in finding ways that people move and get grounded and release all the tensions and the habits and the patterns that we all have in order to feel better. And so that translates into my movement vocabulary. I'm not so interested in technique. I really want to help people breathe better and sense. And so that's something that I'm working towards in my performing, when I do a solo performance or work in a duet with somebody. And it's also true in the way that I approach community engagements with people. So it's not just for audiences, it's for people who are interacting, participating with me. And it can be a hands-on experience, and it can be a one-on-one experience, or it can be with large groups of people.
Excellent. So tell me a little bit about Nourish, not where it is now, because it has grown so much over the year, and it's one of the things that I think is really exciting, is to see how in just 1 year you've been able to take this idea and watch it blossom into something huge. But where did it start from? And how if you were talking to another choreographer who was just starting out, or to somebody who'd never been a part of a dance piece before, how did you find the idea and then figure out how to be able to make it happen in the middle of a pandemic?
I think I need to go back even
Sure.
before what we had discussed earlier, which is that I was hoping to do a pleasure project.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So part of my coming out of retirement from dancing, I was doing body work and parenting full time, and wanted to get back into dancing again, but I felt like I had to break through this hurdle, this internal feeling. I had PTSD and I had depression, and I really felt like, how in the heck am I going to move with all of this in me? And so I had to flip the switch and say, okay, I'm not trying to get past depression, I'm trying to just focus on what's the positive side. And if I start there, then that can be liberating in a way. So I had started interviewing people about what makes them feel good, and hearing people's responses helped me to feel good too.
Yeah.
And so there was this sort of exchange and inquiry about finding positivity. And then the pandemic hit. And the crisis level was just so high in my house. It was ridiculous to try and look for positivity. It was more just like, how do you cope?
Yeah.
What do you need to get through the day? How do you thrive? And it became more nuanced too. I started asking questions about what memories do you have?
And so part of what I'm hearing you talk about there is taking your own experience and looking at what's helpful for you as a starting point for the research that you then use to build something out from. And I guess one of the things within that is thinking about the comment that you had of hearing other people talk about things helped me to be able to find that, and how that's a tool that I think more choreographers are starting to look at within research, that instead of it just being, I'm going into a studio and I'm going to find the movements, that it's actually this form of social engagement with other people that helps to figure out pathways for where the work can go and what's meaningful to people, which definitely seems like it's part of what you've been doing with this project. So then once you were changing what you were focusing on, how did nourish become a word or an idea that you were gathering around?
I needed nourishment. I needed some way to get through. And Monkey House commissioned me to choreograph during the pandemic, which was like a lifeline. And that was my sense of nourishment, finding my creative self amidst hell.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about, well, what is it that I need? You know, studios were shut down. I wasn't able to commute, right? I was isolating, protecting my parents and my children. So I had to find a way to dance safely locally. And another piece of this too is, at that time, I really felt like I was, my dancing was separate from my parenting life, my home life. Like I said, I commute to the dance complex to rehearse, and I do that only when my kids are in school. And so even my role as a parent at home, my kids don't know what I do, my community, their friends, their parents, everybody who I associate with in my neighborhood. Nobody recognized me as an artist or as a dancer. So this was the great solution, was to partner with my local farm. There's an organic, community-based farm in my town of Lexington, and I asked them to be their artist in residence, and they said yes, which was amazing. Lexington Community Farm has a whole history of being farmland. And they have their own history too of spending years of working up legislation and agreements with the town that they could lease the land to keep it as farmland. It had been farmland for centuries. And they also support Black Lives Matter, which was really at the forefront of things last summer. And so I felt comfortable there and welcomed, and that was really, really important. I get to call the shots. I get to make up the terms that I want, that are important to me and valuable to me. And I think that is at the heart of what this project is about in Nourish. That's what's nourishing.
I think that's one of the things that I really respected about your decision with working with the mothers that you're working with in Cambridge, that was not something that there would be recordings available to people afterwards, that was for you and for the women who chose to sign up. And that the idea that we can have meaningful art exchanges that are not within the space of the traditional performing and exhibition spaces, but that can be in spaces that we ourselves create to be able to make them safe, I think is one of the most radical ideas that you've come up with. And one of the most important things for us to take from this project is asking the question of who needs this work and how do they need this work?
It's interesting you point on that, because we haven't really talked about Nourish in Cambridge yet.
Mhm.
And we'll get there.
Yeah,
With
yeah.
the backup and the detail and the information. But just to bring it back into my current today's situation, I had a great exchange with Cambridge Arts.
Mm.
And they are supporting this project. They're helping to promote it. And they asked for media about the Cambridge moms. Now, we would just said I didn't videotape it. There's no documentation. There's nothing pretty to put on Instagram about that project.
Yep.
So I had to, again, sort of rework the material, my concept. What is it that needs to be shared in the public, right?
Mhm.
And so I gave him a picture. It's a picture of me, and with beautiful colors and graphics, and but that's the best it's gonna. It is the best. It actually is really beautiful. I'm happy with how that turned out, but it's different. It's different. Especially in the world of Instagram and people wanting quick reels and the easy TikTok feed of, something to hold on to with movement. And this is not that. It's the private thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, and I think one of the questions that people will sometimes come to is like, well, then what is the public benefit? And to me, it's saying we are actually reaching audiences who might never take advantage of some of the other projects that have happened simply because they haven't felt safe in those spaces or they haven't felt welcomed in those spaces. And we don't ask the question of public benefit when we see a majority of people there and we assume like, oh, that's the public. We're not looking at the people who year after year are not feeling comfortable in those spaces.
Right.
And what should we be doing to be able to welcome those people into creative things? Back for a second. So
Okay.
let's talk about when you first started at Lex Farm.
Okay.
What the actual structure of what you did there was. Because again, sometimes in saying that something is going to be an artist in residence somewhere, it feels like they're going to go there and paint. So
Right. Originally, I had thought I was going to go to the farm and frolic among the fields, and invite other people to come and join me.
Yeah.
It didn't quite turn out that way. I had 7, maybe 8 sessions where I invited people to come to a nurse session, and I would lead people in a warm-up, and we would have different themes that we would explore each week, about getting grounded in the space, noticing what's growing, finding a way to perhaps interact with that area. The first session, there was the strawberry fields, and so we moved around the fields. We couldn't actually go in and pick the strawberries, but around the paths around them keeps the soil fertile and healthy. We did social dances. We did salutations. What kind of interactions can you have as an alternative to shaking hands with people? We had improvisations where people were exploring the farm itself, tuning into their senses, smelling and tasting and noticing the sounds and the sensations on their skin. And things like that. It was very different every time.
And were the people that showed up mostly professional dancers, people that had trained in dance? Who was coming to dance with you?
Very brave, curious people.
Excellent.
They were not dancers. There were families, a lot of parents with younger kids aged 2 to 12, I would say. Artists, friends of friends. People would come one time and then come again the next visit and bring people with them or send other folks with them. And that was, I think, the most exciting thing, to have people returning and getting to meet new people. And they were people of all different races, different abilities. And we found that people stayed and talked. There was just as much talking as there was moving. People getting to know each other for different reasons, how they were connected with each other was fabulous and exciting.
I'm wondering, one last question about the Lex Farm end of things.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about, you had every week in the pictures of you an amazing dress on that would make it so that you could be seen in the fields. And I'm wondering about the choice of what you were wearing there, because it's not traditional farming wear. What went into that costuming for you for those events, and how did that tie into the idea of Nourish?
I work with a costume designer.
Mm-hmm.
Her name is Clementine Kummer. And I had imagined that I was going to wear farming clothes. I was looking at aprons, like really nice workers' aprons and jumpsuits and things like that. And she said, no, you don't want to have any kind of connotation of being a laborer. This is art. This is focusing on the beautiful side. I wear these dresses from a company called Zuri. They're based in New York and Kenya. And I wrote to them to ask if they would be willing to contribute to this Nourish project at Lex Farm. And they said yes. So they sent me a dress, they sent me this amazing basket, and it's been a wonderful partnership. People ask what I'm wearing all the time. I get to pass out their cards. I really believe in the company. They have, they're ethical.
Mm-hmm.
The way they use every bit of fabric, the way they commission artists in West Africa to design the materials, the prints and the patterns, and it's been such fun. And I just feel really great in their clothes, so happy about that.
So then, from the project in Lexington, which was funded both by the Lexington Cultural Council and the Arlington Cultural Council, you kind of moved even closer into the metropolitan area by then bringing work into Cambridge. How did the Nourish project change as you were shifting from the Lex Farm community into Cambridge?
I wanted to be working with other Black mothers. I felt really isolated last summer, and I figured this was a great way to be able to connect all of those needs at once. Cambridge Arts came out with a new grant last year. It's Art for Racial Justice. And so I applied for that, and I got money. And then I needed more money to be able to pay the Black mothers to participate and pay for childcare for them to be able to be fully present. So I applied for the Cambridge Community Foundation's Cultural Capital Fund. And that was another big chunk of dollars that made it possible for me to be in Cambridge.
And with that, how many moms were in the session, and how did you structure the sessions that you would be working on with them each week? So these sessions happened over Zoom. Okay.
And so I was thinking about what's going to fit well on that screen, that grid. So we started out with 12 people. I partnered with Cambridge Center for Families, and they recruited these Black mothers to participate. And people came and left, but we ended up with a solid core, I would say, of 6 to 9 people. And we meet at 7 o'clock every Tuesday for 8 weeks. Prior to those 8 weeks, I had a residency at the Dance Complex in Kendall Square in the Canal District. And so I spent 8 weeks preparing for those Nourish sessions. Every week I would come into Cambridge, into the studio, and I would work on a lesson for the week. And then that would be week 1, week 2, week 3, and that's how I taught the sessions over Zoom. Each week had a different theme, similar to at Lex Farm. I started with different parts of the body. So week 1 was getting grounded and feeling rooted, just like as we had done at the farm. And then we worked up through the body. The pelvis is sort of like the flowers. Solar plexus is sensing and intuiting and knowing in your gut, right? And then there's the heart, and that was all about love. And then there's the throat, which is a week where we talked about using your voice and using it really strongly and clearly and fully. Because that's something Black women don't always get to do or are told that they're too loud. So it was great to really just have that knowing and hear the stories and experiences of people sharing, having that knowledge and that flow. And it kept on going like that.
I as you were talking about working in the dance complex at Canal, I was really struck the day that I came in to watch you when you were working, when you were talking about how, in thinking about the land that we're on and how that's changed from working on Nourish, that you were really aware that at Lex Farm, that was land that had been there for thousands of years. It was used by all of these people to be able to bring food for various reasons in various ways, and that the land at Canal was landfill and was man-made. And I'd never really even thought about where within the Boston area is areas that we filled in, and yet there's a lot of that. And what just thinking about that does to our sense of history and stability. That was one of my favorite observations that you had made, and that's now made me much more aware when I'm various places in the Boston area of thinking about, like, how long has this land been here and what has it been used for?
Right.
I'm curious how that difference in being able to interact with people in person at the farm and in this place where, like, the land felt really stable and had been there for that purpose for so long,
Yes.
how different that was from your experience being on Zoom with people and not even being in the same room and being in very different environments. How did that affect what you were working on and what it felt like for you?
It made me really uneasy. It was really challenging, and it forced me to be upfront asking questions that I know you discuss quite a bit in your work. What is it that you need? Where are you right now? Literally, where are you? What's going on? Who's in the space with you? What's on your mind? What's holding you back? How are you feeling? And those questions to start every session became ingrained. It became part of the writing practice, literally, and the movement practices that we did. And it also, so that was the active part of it.
Yep.
But then the receptive part of it, so being a facilitator on Zoom, required that I really question my own values. I think a lot about decolonizing my dancing, getting rid of the techniques that I learned that don't necessarily serve where I'm at today, and that relates to the Feldenkrais method.
Yep.
That also has to happen in my teaching practices. So my expectations of being able to see and have the sort of reciprocal understanding, oh yeah, you got it, I see you're doing exactly what I modeled for you. Good for you, good for me, right?
Yeah.
That was not the case on these Zoom sessions, because oftentimes they'd have to turn off their cameras, or they would be distracted, or there was a mom who was pregnant and she was she had to elevate her feet, so we had to modify a lot of stuff. And so in the moment, I had to recalibrate and say, okay, what's really important here? Mm-hmm. It's not about being able to be on a wall or whatever the expectation is. It was much more about building community with each other in real time. And even just the smallest bit of movement was meaningful. Mm-hmm. And that was really hard for me to really understand. I think as a trained mover, working with people who don't move and don't have an experience in their bodies, they do have experiences in their bodies, but not a conscious connection. They wanted that. So even if it was just an inkling of what I had imagined, it was useful to them.
I'm curious if there are other spaces other than the farm and Zoom that you're looking at as you move forward with things that you're thinking about exploring in a similar vein as part of Nourish or not as part of Nourish to kind of be your next steps from what you're working on.
Right now, the stance that I'm working on for the ICA is about this present moment, about being whole, getting what I need in the moment, and utilizing all the tools that I've learned up to this point. I'm imagining, well, first of all, I'm really fortunate. I get to stay at Lex Farm. I'm going to do that project again next year. So that's exciting. I'm interested in getting more involved in the physical aspect of farming, the labor part of farming. I'm really hopeful that I'll get to do this sort of work in other farms and gardens across the region. There are people that I definitely would love to work with more. I think it is a very interpersonal kind of process. I would love to be able to go to like Jacob's Pillow or to the yard on the vineyard, places like that where space and dance can interplay with each other. I'm interested in working with my brother, who is a professional jazz musician. He's a trombonist. And we're talking about coming up with a new duet together. Great. And what that process is. Yeah.
I think that's enough for today.